Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Say, let the glory of the Lord, let it rise among us. Let the praises to our King just rise among us. Let it rise. Let the songs of the Lord rise among us. Let the songs of the Lord, let it rise among us. Let the joy of stand here in this place, see the glory on your face. I'm taken by the wonder of your name. See, I'm desperate for your touch. Never needed it so much. 'Cause all I want is you. Sing this and say, all I want is you. 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 I stand here in this place, see the glory on your face. I'm taken by the wonder of your name. I'm desperate for your touch, never needed it so much. 'Cause all I want is you. That's your heart's cry this morning. Come on, give him some praise. Will you do that? Sing us and say, here I am before you, falling in love and seeking your truth, knowing that your perfect grace has brought me to this place. Because of you I freely live my life to you,
was the first Sunday we were allowed to meet back together, it truly was special. Understand, sometimes we take a lot of this for granted. And something that this pandemic should have taught you is how easily this could try to be stopped. And because sometimes people don't see the necessity of it, how essential it is. See, we as believers, we know it's essential because it's our life. We desire to be around. Yes, I know Zoom and Facebook Live. It's nice when you have to. Again, we're going to continue to do Facebook Live from here on out. People haven't seen haven't minded having the thing there. I think sometimes you really don't even notice it. Plus, we figured out just a little while ago how we could truly get the better audio going through, and how it could truly mirror image the screen. So basically, you wouldn't see it reversed if it was facing this way. So we pick up better audio. But again, I'm thankful for this, and then truly hope we never get back to a point where we take coming together as God's people for granted. Where again, I love the Zoom thing, because I will say this past Tuesday night Bible study, I don't know if you all were in Bible study. If you notice, my background's a little different. Our background's a little different. Well, we were 14 stories up in Ocean City, and we were at a hotel. One only waited for just a couple of days, and we were 14 stories up. I had the windows open. If you saw my eyes cut this way every once in a while, I was looking out at the ocean and things like that. So, but yeah, I'm grateful for this. But I'm grateful for this. I truly do enjoy being together with you. I do not take being your pastor lightly. I truly do believe God impresses me with words and messages to share with you that are for your good. I just don't do it to do it. There's other things I can do in this life. I've made livings at other professions and all that stuff. But again, this is what God has called me to do. And again, and I love you, and I appreciate your faithfulness of being here and your desire to be here. And again, let us never truly lose sight of the importance of us meeting together. God is good. But I thought I was going to start this message, this series of messages a couple of weeks ago, but God sort of put a little brakes on that, where we were still dealing with who is Jesus, and we were dealing with, I thought we really need to deal with the importance of the resurrection, what all it entails, and even that they were not, and all you can know about the resurrection, everything that goes on. But I truly hope that the messages encourage you. But last week, we started with the thought of how do I know? And I said this to start off the series last week. And I said, we are continuing our series of messages entitled, How Do I Know? In our Christian walk of faith and relationship with Jesus, there will be times when someone will ask us about our faith and what we believe and why we believe certain things. Not only what we believe, but why. And the Bible tells us that we should be prepared to give an answer in those situations. We should be prepared to do this. And here's where we find this out. In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, it says, instead, you must worship Christ as Lord of your life. And if someone asks you about your Christian hope, always be ready to explain it. Peter there, he's telling the people, the church that he's writing to, he says, when someone asks you, why do you believe Jesus? Why do you have hope in Jesus? Have an answer ready. And again, I don't know, how many of us ever thought of that? Have we ever thought about, someone asked me, why do I believe in Jesus? What would I tell them? Why do I believe that? Again, we're dealing with, how do I know God exists? Why do we believe this? How can we show them reasonably why we believe this? See, this verse is the reason for this series. There will be questions that individuals ask that many times we are not prepared to answer. But understand, we can have a knowledgeable faith. In other words, we can know why we believe what we believe. We don't just have to have a blind faith. Well, that's what my pastor says, or that's what my church says, or that's what my grandma and grandpa taught me, or that's what my mom and dad taught me, or whatever, or my aunt or uncle, whatever it is. But you can have a knowledgeable and intelligent faith about why you believe what you believe. Never let intelligence get in the way of faith, true faith. Because it all comes down to faith. But we can have a knowledgeable and not necessarily blind faith. Now, there are times in our walk where we must have a blind faith, but that's talking about trusting in God to either do things or move you a certain way and things like that. Sort of what I was talking about this last Wednesday when I was dealing with Abram, when we were doing our Wednesday little talk session, hang time. But we can have a knowledgeable faith, not just a blind faith. Here are some of the questions that may be asked of you that we're going to attempt to answer during this series. How do you know God exists? Is the Bible reliable? Those first two are some big ones. And the third one I'm going to name here too is another big one. Is it too narrow to say that Jesus is the only way to God? That's going to be one we get into that too, especially in America today. I know around the world, but especially what we're dealing with in America today. And other such questions, we're going to attempt to deal with these. But understand, each message will not be in all you can know on the subject. I'll only be hitting the tip of the iceberg. But I'm going to give you the sources that I use. So if you want to find more information out about this, you can, because the information's out there. The question is, are you willing to go study it, look it up, dive into it, and all of that. So today, before we get ready to start in, I'm going to tell you my main source comes from a website that's called evangelismexplosion.org. That's where I got a lot what we're talking about today. But everything we're going to be talking about in this entire series, additional information can be found with these different websites. You can go to Josh McDowell's website. You can go to Randall Niles' website. Check out Lee Strobel when he talks about a case for a creator, a case for Christ, case for the resurrection, all of those things where, because I don't know if Lee Strobel was an investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune. He started out as I think he would claim himself as being an atheist, at least not an agnostic, who started out again trying to disprove the faith, same as Josh McDowell and all that. And when he truly looked at the evidence, I'm going to hint to that a little bit later on in the message, God spoke to them, and they gave their hearts and lives to Jesus Christ. So these are people who have done a lot of the work for you. They've done a lot of the research for you, where you can go in, read them, listen to stuff, the talks they have on there, and do that. And also, listen to talks by a guy by the name of John Lennox, and also Ravi Zacharias. Ravi Zacharias is no longer with us. He just passed away probably within the past 2 months. And but man, truly a great apologist for the Word of God. And but his organization is still going well. In fact, you're going to see a video from his organization today. It's not him, it's someone in his organization. But again, these are places where you can go. And these are just to name a few. But these are ones that I know that you can go to, and I don't worry about what they're telling you. You understand what I'm saying? So, because you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again today. Unfortunately, too many American Christians know just enough about the Bible to get themselves in trouble. And what I mean by that, they know just enough about the Bible where if someone comes along who may seem like they know a little bit more, or they throw in there something that's not necessarily truly in line with God's Word because they're not really versed in the Scriptures, or they really aren't trying to grow their faith, they can get twisted into a wrong type of doctrine or faith. Again, understand, Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses are not Christians. They're a cult. Okay? And the way that they're teaching is not about Jesus and Jesus alone. So again, and that's where you can sort of find out what it is. If it's not about Jesus, I'm sort of getting to have myself another message, aren't I? But again, I'll just sort of throw it out there in case you're not here for that week or you don't catch it. But if it's not about Jesus and Jesus alone, you need to stay away from it. Amen? Because it's Jesus, 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 whoa, 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 Jesus, 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 yeah. Those of you know what I'm talking about? Okay, all right, here we go, all right. Okay, that's sort of a song that Mike Warnke tells in one of his acts, that when some of the rockers and hippies were being saved in the late 60s or 70s, they really didn't know anything about the Bible. The only thing they knew was Jesus. So they simply made up a song. They made up a song that said, Jesus, Jesus, whoa, 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 whoa. Jesus, Jesus, yeah, 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 yeah. Jesus, Jesus, whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah. That was the song. It's all about, anyway, it's good, because you know what it's all about? Jesus. Amen? All right. So we're continuing today to look at this thought of question 1. How do I know God exists? And I have down here continue. And from last week, here's a little synopsis from last week. Last week, I told you that the existence of God is taken for granted in the Bible. The Bible does not set out to prove the existence of God. The Bible just simply states, what? God. Because in the very first chapter, the very first verse of the Bible, what are the first, I think it's the first 4 words. In the beginning, God. First 4 words in, it introduces God. And it just simply makes the point, God exists. And then it just goes on to tell you about who God is, how He interacts, how He thinks, and all of this. It never attempts to explain or to argue the existence of God. It just simply states God is here. God exists. But is this logical? Can modern science allow such a notion? How could you recognize the evidence of an intelligent creator? Now, to sort of get your mind sort of turning a little bit this morning, I said, I have 2 videos this morning. Now, I'm going to be sticking a lot to my notes again this morning because there's a lot of them to share with you. But the first video I want to introduce to you is by a gentleman by the name of Randall Niles. And he's one of the ones I mentioned. Go to the website to find out. But just listen to something he has to say this morning about the existence of God.
So one of my best buds, he's a naturalist. I think he'd even call himself an atheist. And we got this discussion, and he says, "Can you prove God's existence to me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, obviously the naturalistic, materialistic world is the default. Therefore, the theist has to prove God's existence." And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. That somehow atheism is the standard default, and that the theist has to prove God's existence. But I said, you know what? I'm going to take a shot. Because I truly believe in my heart of hearts that it takes more faith to be an atheist today than it does to be a theist, or one that believes in God. And so I took a stab. He said, no, I want certainty. I want scientific certainty. I said, well, I can't prove God through some kind of notions of mathematical calculations. But I say 21st century tools have allowed us to declare an intelligent designer like never before. Let me give you a shot. Causation. Okay? I think God provides the best explanation for the existence of all that we see. The origin of the universe and its fine-tuning. Because your alternative is that it all popped into existence out of nowhere for no apparent reason. I think that order. I think God provides the best explanation for all of this order, this design, this complexity that we see. Abstract notions of numbers and the laws of physics and the natural laws and the chemical properties. All of these things, that ordered complexity, I think, declares God. Because your alternative is that all of those things randomly developed out of the chaotic first elements, the Big Bang. The design that's inherent in everything that we see, the stellar, the planetary, the organic worlds. I think God provides the best explanation for all of that incredible design and complexity and code. Because really, the alternative is that all of that popped out of the desert somewhere when matter was just acting on matter for a sufficient period of time with no guidance whatsoever. Ethics and morality. See, I think God provides the best explanation for the existence of love and altruism and a conscience. Something that has us all look inside when we're making a moral decision. Where does that come from? Does matter become mind? Or does mind beget matter? Does mind become matter? You see where I'm going with that? Again, I think God provides the best explanation for the existence of the subconscious world, the ethical world, the moral world, and notions of emotion and love. So when I looked at the causation and the order and the design and the ethics, I flipped it back on him and I said, I think that I've made a pretty good case for the existence of God. Your turn.
So that, a little bit what he's talking about in there, we're going to deal with this morning. But according to the Bible, anyone who disbelieves the existence of God is one lacking understanding. And I shared this verse with you last week also. Psalms 14 verse 1 says, "Only fools say in their hearts, there is no God. They are corrupt and their actions are evil. Not one of them does good." Again, if you want to know a little bit more about what I shared last week, that's about what I'm going to talk about last week, about today. But go back and relook at the message and sort of see what the different things that I brought up. I brought up arguments and to present against people like Richard Dawkins and all that, who is a premier atheist fighting. He wrote The God Delusion. And but again, how even in their own research and even their own statements, they say we have a problem with it, no problem with what we believe, but they overlook it anyway. Okay, and so, but again, as Randall Niles says, you know, when we look at certain things in this world, God is really the best explanation for stuff that we see. And of course, people, I know lots of, and I don't think I have this in my message, I'm pretty sure I don't remember having it in here, but a lot of times I know people say, well, if there's a God, why is all the evil happening in this world? Now, what you need to understand is, evil happens where there's a lack of God, where people do not want God in their life. God's not going to force himself on anybody. So if people don't want to listen to God, they can go do whatever they want. That's the thing about a free will. That's the thing about us being able to decide to do what we want to do. You know, because have you ever heard somebody say, you know, there's only two things in this life you have to do? You might know what those two things are. Have you ever heard that? Die and pay taxes. But actually, that is an errant statement. There's only one thing in this life that you have to do, whether you want to do it or not. If time happens, is die. If you don't want to pay taxes, you don't have to. Now, I'm not encouraging you to do that. You don't have to pay taxes if you don't want. Now, there will be consequences for it. When Uncle Sam finally catches up to you, and the comptroller of Maryland finally catches up to you, there'll be a price to pay. But guess what? You don't have to pay them if you don't want. But I would suggest for you that you do. Okay? I am not encouraging anarchy. Okay? But some people assume that in order to believe in God, that we must literally shelf our brain, shelf our intelligence, because all it is involved is having a blind faith, and that is not the case. See, understand, God invites us to come and consider Him and His truth. I'm going to take this a little bit out of context, but it is what the statement says. God in His Word says, "Come and let us reason together." He says, "Come, let us reason together." I know it's talking about our sins and our failures and different things like that. Understand that He's the one that can straighten us up. But also with all of this, He is telling us, we can come. Let's talk to Him. Let's seek Him about this and discuss this with Him. He's not saying it's this way or the highway. He's saying He's a big enough God for you to ask questions about. And honestly, He will give you answers. We can offer good, calculated, reasonable answers for our faith in God and His Word. You know that? We can offer good, calculated, reasonable answers for our faith in God and His Word. By contrast, it is the unbeliever who has taken a blind leap of faith when they have rejected the existence of God without ever investigating the evidence. Because they automatically just assume it. Fact is, a lot of times, I'm telling you, when you go out and then people ask you things, you begin to try to defend your faith, you try to defend your belief in God and the existence of God, they're going to rely on old arguments that they're not keeping up with what modern science is bringing out. And that's what I was sharing last week in the message. Modern science is showing more and more we didn't develop from something very simple. We truly developed from something that's highly complex. The more microscopic you go, the more complex life is. And that's not, you know, it's not something that's going to simply come into being. Something that is complex had to have been designed, had to have been created. And they know that's a problem, but yet they sit there and they call, remember I said last week, nature the blind watchmaker. Nature didn't have any purpose or whatever, and it didn't have any design behind it, but you know, think about it. It's an oxymoron. A watchmaker without purpose, okay? I guess then the watchmaker's not making watches, he's making pancakes. That he's not a watchmaker. He's a pancake maker.
Right.
All right. In Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 20, this is what we read. It says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people, who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them. In other words, who's Paul talking about? He's talking about those who are godless, those who are wicked. He says, what may be known to God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. And since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. In other words, Paul's writing, when we simply look into nature, nature screams creator, 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 designer, designer, designer,
Yep.
artist, artist,
Yep.
artist, lawgiver, lawgiver, lawgiver. That's what it screams. Because there is order. And understand this. Order cannot come from chaos. It's not possible. But yet did they say that nature set aside its own laws and everything for a certain period of time? Well, the fact is, why did nature need laws if there's no purpose to anything? You understand what I'm saying? So again, that's why we say that it's the most reasonable concept for our existence, for existence of the universe and everything, is God. And by the way, there is no evidence to prove that there is no God. They cannot prove that God doesn't exist. The same as we can't maybe scientifically prove that God exists, they cannot prove that God does not exist. Because the proof is not there. If challenged, an honest skeptic will have to admit he has no proof that God does not exist. If they're honest. Because there is no proof. Put it this way, in order to prove God doesn't exist, you would have to be godlike. And here's what I mean by that. In order to prove that God doesn't exist, you would have to have knowledge of everything that has transpired from the beginning of time. And what was ever before then. You would truly have to have intimate knowledge of all of that. And know all of that. And if you were a being who knew all of that and experienced all of that, you would be what? Godlike. So in order to disprove a God, that there's a God, you would have to be God to disprove that there's a God. So which means in that case, what does that mean? There's a God. But we can rationally prove that God exists. Like I said, we can't exactly prove, but by drawing a picture, by drawing an exact picture of God for the skeptics, but we can give them some logical proof of His existence. Now here's something, there's some new stuff we're getting into today here. One of the proofs we can use for God has 4 points. So if you want to, remember the word Cado, C-A-D-O, Cado, C-A-D-O. And you will always have an answer for the hope that is in you. And here's what Cado stands for. C is for creation. Every time you see a piece of machinery, an engine, a motorcycle, a car, even a bicycle, you know that it has what? A creator or a maker. Every time you see it, you know it has a creator or a maker. Art. A is for art. Every time you see a piece of art, you know it has an artist. How many of y'all know that Mona Lisa just appeared one day? Boom, there she was. Boom, there it is. Boom, there it is. That's literally what they say and believe. But if you see a piece of art, you know there is an artist behind it. Now, depending on the art, it may be a good artist or it may be an artist, but But we know any art that our lovely grandchildren make is the most beautiful art you've ever seen.
Absolutely.
So C, creation. A, art. D, design. Every time you see a wristwatch, you know it has a designer. Anything any type of thing you see that is complex, you know it has a designer. Someone sat down and thought it out and designed that. And then O is for order. Every time you see order, I have this written down here, I wasn't gonna do it. I was gonna line this up, but if I was to line up 10 Coke cans across this altar here this morning, you would know that somehow, in some way, someone put those 10 Coke cans there, am I right?
Right.
They didn't all of a sudden, boop, there it is, you know? They didn't all of a sudden just get there. You know that there has to be, and I'm going to use the English language here, an orderer. Yeah, an orderer. Hey, it fits in the Cato, okay? Because honestly, think about this. When we look around at the universe, what do we see? We see creation, we see art, we see design, we see order. Remember, that's a lot of what Randall talked about in his video, didn't he? That God's the best explanation for this. We see these things. If everything, again, this is what I don't understand, so listen to this statement. If everything else has a creator, artist, designer, and orderer behind it, isn't it reasonable to expect that behind the incredible, intricate, complicated, and marvelous universe, there is also a creator, an artist, a designer, and order? Isn't it reasonable to think so? Isn't it reasonable to think so? I'm going to share an illustration with you that I found on this website that we're dealing with today with this talk. They have down here, they say, the anthropologist finds a rock with evidence. An anthropologist is someone who studies the existence of human civilization and things like that, the order and all of that. The anthropologist finds a rock with evidence that it at one time, long ago, had been shaped into a tool, and he uses it as proof of human civilization existing in ancient history. So you hear me, sir? He finds, as he's going through his digs and discovers things, he finds this rock that has been shaped and made into a tool. So he says, okay, since we see this as a tool, we know that human civilization existed here. See, the rock has obviously been chiseled, which indicates that it was intentionally shaped for a purpose. See, he says, these things just don't happen on their own. The chisel marks on this rock prove there was an intelligence and designer behind it. Okay? Then he looks at the infinitely more complex design of humans. And does he remain consistent with his investigative protocol and conclude that there must have been some intelligent designer behind the human being? The answer is no. Since he has already decided that God doesn't exist, and that's the key there. Since he's already decided that God doesn't exist, he concludes that man must have somehow come into existence apart from any outside intervention. That man must have just crawled out from under a rock, maybe even the same rock that he turned into this tool. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But that's modern day science. should say that's modern day evolutionary, agnostic, atheistic science. They throw reason truly out the window and are trying to give credit to something that truly makes no sense. And I have down there, is that logical? Is that reasonable? Does that make any sense? Of course not, but that's their belief. Years ago, I was watching, I can't remember if it was on National Geographic or whatever it was, but I was listening to a evolutionary scientist who was discussing how a dolphin-like creature became a dog. And again, if I wouldn't have seen it, it hurt my ears, I probably thought it was, someone was joking. But he was sitting there saying, he said, you see these skeleton bones right here? This is a prehistoric dolphin. And you see these bones here, the skeleton here, it's a dog bones. This creature here became this creature here. He's stating it emphatically. He said, now all I have to do to prove it is find the in-between. And I was scratching my head. I said, okay, you have these skeletons here, and you have these skeletons here. You don't have skeletons here, but yet this became this. You're saying all you need to do to absolutely prove that you're right is find the in-between. Well, aren't you sort of getting the cart before the horse? And I remember years ago, they thought they actually found, you ever hear the report that they thought they found a missing link?
Yeah.
That they found a bird and a reptile skeleton together? And they were broadcasting, we found a missing link, we found a missing link, found a missing link. And they paid money for this thing. I forget how much money they paid to get this fossil. They didn't do the research. Because when they finally tested it, first off, the stones were of different types of thing, the fossils were different, and the stones came from different dates. Someone duped them and got money out of them. But of course, when they printed their retraction, it was in the back of the magazine. Yeah. But again, as we're talking about all this, I do believe God is the most reasonable explanation. So I'm going to close with a couple of thoughts here. All we ask from these scientists and everything else, all we ask is for reason and consistency. If there is creation, there is a creator. If there is art, there is an artist. If there is design, there is a designer. If there is order, there is an orderer. This is logical, reasonable proof that there is a God behind this universe. Because again, as Randall said on there, God makes the most logical sense. See, the Christian faith is not a blind faith. It is logically defensible. We can defend it with logic. So you don't have a blind faith here this morning. We truly do believe in something that when you look at the evidence that is out there, God is the best explanation. But to sort of show you how crazy they can be, I have another video I'm going to show you, which was done by Ravi Zacharias' Institute, and it's entitled, Prove to Me That God Exists.
Prove to me that God exists, skeptics sometimes demand. Well, think about the word proof for a moment. Cold, hard, strict proof really only exists in a few very narrow areas of human inquiry, such as maths or logic. In most areas of human study, such as philosophy or art or history or even the sciences or law, for example, we don't rely on proof so much as looking where the evidence points. We weigh the evidence that we have and we determine what best explains the evidence. Let me illustrate. Imagine that I was to go for a walk in the woods near my house with my friend Tom. Now, I'm convinced that in these woods lives the Canadian national animal, the beaver. Tom is a skeptic. Well, after a few minutes walking, we come across some animal dung, some animal scat lying on the path in front of us. I point to it and I say, look, Tom, that's beaver scats, beaver dung, proof that beavers live in these woods. No, he says, shaking his head sceptically. Those were droppings left by the lesser spotted maple mouse. I shrug my shoulders, we walk on. A few minutes later, we see some trees standing by the side of the trail, bearing the clear signs of gnawing of tooth marks a couple of feet off the ground. Look, I say, beavers bit those trees. Beavers have been at work in these woods. He shakes his head sceptically. No, says Tom. Those trees were chewed by deer. Very short deer with very sharp teeth. We walk on for a few more minutes, and we come to a clearing in the woods with a big lake in the middle of the clearing. The lake has been formed by sticks laid across a stream, and in the middle of the lake is what appears to be a beaver lodge made of sticks. I point to the lodge and the dam and I say, look, Tom, what more evidence do you need? A beaver lodge, a beaver dam, beavers live in these woods. No, he says, there were heavy rains last week, don't you remember? And floods have swept through these woods and just arranged those sticks in a way that looks like beaver activity, but there are no beavers here. Well, as we leave the woods, I have to admit, I wasn't able to show Tom on that occasion a real live beaver. But we did see a number of pieces of evidence that are best explained by the hypothesis that beavers lived in the woods, whereas Tom had to engage in these kind of ad hoc explanations every time a new piece of data came up. I think something similar is going on when it comes to God. Yes, there may not be one single knockdown piece of evidence for God, but I believe the God hypothesis best explains a wide array of pieces of evidence that, taken together, point to the fact that God exists. We've explored some of them in this video series. Single pieces of evidence that on their own might not convince you, but taken together, the evidence leads to God. But one final thought. I wonder if it's ever occurred to you that Christianity is not primarily an argument, an intellectual position, or a philosophy. God primarily is not concerned with defeating you in some kind of game of intellectual chess. God primarily is looking for our trust and our commitment. Here is the evidence, says the Bible, and on the basis of that evidence, will you put your trust in Him?
Again, I hope you found that information and informative and encouraging. Like I said, even if you present them with evidence of what we believe to be the best cause for this universe and everything else, they could still come with the argument saying, no. Again, it's not about proving them absolutely wrong and proving them absolutely right, because as he said at the end of that, it's about us getting to a point where there's enough evidence there to where we say, God, I believe in you, and I trust in you. See, again, we can have a knowledgeable, intelligent faith that God exists, and know that He's real, and then let that faith begin to just grow inside of you to where He reveals Himself to you more and more and more. And again, as I stated earlier, the Bible makes it clear that anyone who does not believe in God is without excuse. Because again, we read in Romans 1, verses 18 through 20, it says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people, who suppress the truth by their wickedness. See, they suppress the truth. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. God has plainly put it out there. But again, the bottom line is you either believe or you don't believe. It's a matter of whether or not you believe the evidence or not. I believe over the last 2 weeks I made a pretty strong argument for the existence of God. And again, there's a lot more evidence out there. There's a lot more study out there. And again, if you want to find out some of the stuff is, go check out what Lee Strobel has to say. Check out what Randall Niles has to say. Check out what Josh McDowell has to say, and Robert Zacharias and John Lennox. Again, I was trying to share with you guys by the name of John Lennox last week. This dude is a mathematician. He's a genius. The stuff he talks about, I'm sitting there and I'm just going like, and some of it's going in and some of it's going, but like I said, this dude, he actually argued in the halls of Oxford. He's argued in the halls of Harvard. And they don't laugh at him or anything. I mean, he holds his ground. And you just have to get used to his British accent. And, but again, the information's out there. And again, I encourage you, find as much out about God as you can. Strengthen your faith as much as you can. 'Cause I'm telling you, I do believe we're entering into an age and a time in our country. You better know what you believe, because if not, you may find yourself being led astray. And I do believe that's why God is having us go through these things, to strengthen us and encourage us, and to get us rooted and grounded on a proper and firm foundation. Amen. I'm asking our musicians to come. And we went in their time together singing a song. It's one of my favorite songs. This song has been in my heart, my life for quite a while now, for well over a year. Again, the song initially, I remembered it more so after my dad passed and we were at the viewing and different things like that. I would find myself whistling a tune. And I was just whistling that, and I'm like, where in the world, what tune is that? It was just in my mind. And of course, because of just listening to, we have our car set on a radio station, and then because it was constantly playing that song a lot during that time, it was a song called Build My Life. And that song has meant so much to me since that time. Not maybe because the trigger what it was, or the name of it was during the time when my father passed. And help me understand that it's all about him. Not my dad, but about Jesus.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I want to build my life upon him. I want to build my life upon his faithfulness, upon his love, upon who he is. Because a life built upon him is built upon a sure foundation that you never have to worry about falling. See, Jesus gave a parable. This wasn't in my message. I was planning on going here. But Jesus gave a parable. He said there was a wise man and a foolish man. A wise man built his house upon a rock with a firm foundation. The foolish man built his house upon sand. And here's the thing. He said, rain came. See, rain came to both of them, to the wise and the foolish. He said, rain came, beat upon the house. The floods came. The house that was built upon the sand, it collapsed. He said, great was the collapse of that house. He said, but the house that was built upon the rock stood firm. Why? Because it was built upon a firm foundation. See, storm came to both. Understand, in this world, whether you're a believer in Jesus Christ or you're not, storms are going to come. But depending on where you have your hope rooted and grounded, it depends on whether or not you will stand in that storm. Will depend on whether or not you suffer great loss or not. And Jesus simply followed saying, those who hear my words and don't listen to them or listen to them are either one of these two guys. So what are you going to do with what God has had me present to you today? What are you going to do with the truth of his word and the evidence that's been produced? I don't know about you. I don't know about you. But I'm going to build my life upon him. I'm going to build my life upon Jesus Christ. I hope that's your desire too. So stand with us this morning. Let's just end our time together declaring that we're going to build our life upon him. Amen? Upon him. Sing this and say.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy